She's my wife. You're not taking her anywhere. Despite my son-in-law's screams behind me, I held my daughter tight and pulled her out into the pouring rain. A taxi stopped, and shaking, I begged, "Please, take us to the hospital." The doctor was speechless when he saw the bruises covering her body. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. I still remember that day. The July midday sun in Chicago burned like fire. The scorching air rose from the asphalt. I was walking down the usual street that led to my daughter Maya's house. I don't know why, but that morning I woke up with a strange sense of unease. It wasn't like everyday worries, but more like an invisible whisper pushing me to do something. I was carrying a basket of ripe, fragrant mangoes that I had carefully picked at the market that morning, and I decided to stop by my daughter's house without calling first. I don't know why, but I felt the need to see her immediately. When I arrived, I knocked on the door a little nervous. Maya came to open it, but from the first moment, I saw that something was wrong. Her face was pale, her eyes lifeless, as if she had been up all night. What surprised me the most was that in the middle of that suffocating heat, she was wearing a long-sleeved black thick blouse that clung to her body. I frowned, holding back the question burning on my lips. "Mom brought some mangoes for you two," I said, trying to sound cheerful as if to dispel the heavy atmosphere that surrounded me. I entered the house, put the basket on the table, and out of habit, I took my daughter's hand to pull her closer and ask her to put the mangoes on a plate. But in that instant, touching her arm, I froze. Under the fabric, I felt a swelling, and when I accidentally lifted the sleeve, I discovered a huge bruise the size of my palm, dark and stained like poisonous ink. My heart sank as if someone was squeezing it. "What happened to your arm, Maya?" I asked, my voice trembling, trying to stay calm, though fear betrayed me. She flinched, her eyes clouding with panic, before forcing a clumsy smile. "Oh, Mom, it's nothing," she murmured softly, and immediately pulled the sleeve back down to hide the bruise. I looked into her eyes, searching for the truth. But Maya avoided my gaze, lowered her head, pressing her lips together as if afraid to say too much. The way she avoided me crushed my soul. I wanted to insist. I wanted to scream at her, "Don't lie to me, sweetie." But I held back because I knew that if I pushed her too hard, she would shut down even more. Just then, Richard, Maya's husband, came out of the back room. He smiled with an air so friendly it was fake, and a chill ran down my spine. "Hello, mother-in-law. What a surprise to see you today without any notice," he said in a syrupy voice. But his eyes were cold and sharp. As he passed by Maya, I caught the look he gave her, sharp as a knife, full of threat. She immediately lowered her head, clasping her hands in a silence that chilled me. I sat in the chair, trying to make conversation to ease the tension that filled the house. "How are you two? How's work going for Richard?" I asked, but their answers were short and dry. Richard, sitting across from me with his legs crossed, smiled and talked, but his every gesture felt false. Maya barely said a word, just nodding or responding with a timid, "Yes." The atmosphere was so tense that even the sound of a spoon hitting a glass when Mia served water echoed dryly, full of anguish. Soon, Richard stood up, making an excuse that he had an appointment. "I'm leaving early, Mom. Stay and hang out with Maya, okay?" he said, and left quickly, not forgetting to cast another glance at her. When the door slammed shut, the atmosphere in the house seemed to collapse. Maya sighed, and her shoulders slumped as if a weight had been lifted. I looked at her, and my heart ached as if it were being cut. I tried to bring up a happy topic, to draw her out of the shell she had retreated into. "When you were a little girl, you loved to bake cakes. Do you still do that now?" I asked, remembering the days when she was little in the kitchen with her hands full of flour, smiling brightly when her first cake came out. But Maya only answered in a distant voice, "Yeah, I've been busy with housework, so I haven't really thought about it." Her answer was like a knife to my chest. The girl who was once cheerful and full of dreams, who wanted to open a small bakery, now spoke of her life as if she were a stranger. I stayed a little longer, looking for a way for her to open up, but every question I asked, she dodged. Her eyes gazed out the window, distant, as if trying to hide a secret she didn't dare share. As I left, I turned for one last look. Maya stood in the doorway, her hands trembling, struggling to force a smile to say goodbye. "Be careful on your way home, Mom," she said, but her voice broke as if she were holding something back. I walked out the gate with a heavy heart. The bruise on my daughter's arm, her evasive look, and Richard's cold expression were stuck in my mind. The feeling of unease from that day at Maya's house wouldn't leave me alone. It was like a small thorn that kept digging into me, a dull ache. I couldn't stay still when the image of the bruise on my daughter's arm haunted me every night. I started looking for excuses to stop by her house more often. Sometimes I'd bring a pot of her favorite chicken noodle soup, which she'd loved since she was a child. Other times, a basket of oranges freshly picked from the neighbor's tree. "Just passing by, honey," I'd say, trying to seem natural, but really I just wanted to see my daughter to make sure she was okay. Even though deep down I knew nothing was okay, every time I went, I saw Maya in long sleeves, even on the hottest days in Chicago when the heat made you sweat just by taking a few steps. Once I stood outside the door and saw her open the gate with her sleeves covering her wrists, as if she wanted to hide her entire body from the world. I avoided asking directly for fear she would close up more, but every time I looked at her, I felt a pang in my chest. One afternoon, when I brought a bag of oranges, Maya was setting the table. She accidentally dropped a spoon, and when she bent down to pick it up, her sleeve slid back, revealing a new bruise, purple and spread across her thin wrist. I felt my heart stop for a second. "Did you fall again, sweetie?" I asked, my voice as gentle as I could manage, trying to hide the tremor I felt inside. Maya flinched, her eyes wide with a flash of panic before she quickly pulled her sleeve down. "Yes, I slipped in the bathroom," she answered, her voice low as if she were trying harder to convince herself than me. I nodded, but her clumsy lies echoed in my head. The last time she said she'd fallen off her bike. Another time that she'd bumped into the edge of a door. A different reason each time, but none of them could hide the truth I was beginning to suspect. I wanted to scream, to grab her by the shoulders and demand an explanation, but I was afraid. Afraid that if I pushed her too much, I would push her further away, and I couldn't bear that. Another afternoon, I brought a pot of hot soup, hoping the smell of food would cheer my daughter up. But this time, Richard was the one who opened the door. He flashed a smile, but his eyes, sharp and cold as ice, made me shiver. "Mom's here early," he said with a sweet but fake voice. He stood in the doorway for a few seconds, as if he didn't want to let me in right away. I slipped past him, trying to stay calm, and saw Maya washing clothes in a corner of the house. Her hands were red with small cuts, as if they had been in water for too long. When she saw me, she quickly pulled down her sleeves to cover the wounds that I knew very well were not from slipping or falling off a bike. "I brought you soup," I told her, trying to sound cheerful, though my eyes never left her. Maya just nodded without saying anything and avoided my gaze again. I sat in the kitchen pretending to help her clean vegetables, but really I was watching every move they both made. Richard sat across from me and started talking about his job, his voice smooth and confident. But I noticed that every time Maya dropped a fork or spilled a little water, his gaze would lock onto her cold and threatening. Maya would tremble, apologizing immediately, her voice as quiet as a child's afraid of being scolded. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to," she murmured, and I saw her hands clenched together under the table. I wanted to jump up to scream at Richard that he had no right to make my daughter feel afraid, but I held back. I knew that if I exploded right then, everything would get worse. I just silently stored away every piece of this painful truth. Every look, every gesture, every lie. Days later, I returned with a bag of cookies I had made myself, some sugar cookies that Maya adored as a child. I purposely chose a time when Richard wasn't home because I had decided to do something I never thought I'd have the courage to do. Taking advantage of a moment when Maya went to get some water, I hid a tiny camera behind a potted plant in the living room. My heart was pounding and my hands were shaking so much I almost dropped it. "I'm going to leave the bag of cookies in that corner so they stay fresh," I said aloud, distracting Maya while I adjusted the camera's angle to cover the entire room. I didn't know if what I was doing was right or wrong, but the only thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't keep watching my daughter live in fear without doing anything. As I left, I looked back and saw Maya standing there, a forced smile on her lips. "Thanks, Mom," she said, but her voice sounded dull, as if she were carrying a secret too heavy to bear. That night, I sat alone in my small room in front of the computer. I put water on to boil for tea, but my hands were shaking so much I spilled hot water on the table. When I turned on the camera feed, my heart was hammering against my chest, as if I were about to walk through a door to a truth I both craved and feared. At first, the images showed everyday scenes. Maya was cleaning Richard on the sofa with his phone, but the tension in my daughter's every move was obvious. Her smile was nothing more than a mask, hiding a fear I could feel even through the screen. Her posture was always hunched, as if she were waiting for something terrible at any moment. Once, Richard got up and walked past her, and I could see her shoulders flinch in an automatic defensive reflex. I watched intently, holding my breath. A part of me prayed I was wrong, that it was all just the imagination of an overprotective mother. But deep down in the very core of my heart, I knew I was about to face a truth I didn't want to accept. That night, I sat in the old chair in my living room, my hands trembling as I made a strong cup of tea. The aroma did nothing to calm the anxiety squeezing my chest. I turned on the computer and connected to the camera, lacing my fingers together as if that could hold on to what little calm I had left. I knew I was about to see a truth I might have preferred not to discover, but I had no choice anymore. For Maya, my daughter, I had to do it. The computer screen lit up, and the camera's image appeared with perfect clarity. I saw Maya silently cleaning the living room, a broom in her hand, sweeping every corner of the floor with slow movements, as if she wanted to stretch out time. Richard was sprawled on the couch, his eyes glued to his phone, his feet on the table as if he owned the world. He kicked off his dirty shoes right in the middle of the floor in front of her. Maya stopped for a moment. Her shoulders trembled slightly. Then she bent down to pick them up and put them neatly in a corner. When she looked up, I saw the icy glint in Richard's eyes like a silent warning. I felt a knot in my chest. I wanted to reach through the screen and pull my daughter out of that house, but all I could do was sit there helpless, watching every painful moment unfold. Another day I opened the camera feed again. This time during dinner, Maya brought a hot soup, placing it carefully on the table. I saw her force a smile, but it was so weak it looked like a leaf about to fall. Richard picked up his spoon, tried a bite of soup, and suddenly slammed the table hard. The sound made me flinch. "What kind of salty soup is this? Are you trying to poison me?" He snapped with contempt. Maya shrank, her gaze fixed on the floor, murmuring an apology. "I'm sorry. I'll cook it again." I saw how her hands trembled as she quickly got up, as if she feared that taking another second would mean punishment. Richard just grunted and went back to his phone as if she wasn't even worth a thought. But the moment that froze my blood happened one afternoon a few days later. I was in front of the screen, gripping the edge of the table, breathing with difficulty. In the image, Richard was in the living room with a beer in his hand, his face flushed. Maya was nearby with a freshly folded shirt in her arms. He looked at her and roared, "Did you forget to iron my shirt?" "Are you good for anything?" Maya was startled, her voice breaking. I'm sorry I forgot. I'll do it right now." But Richard didn't stop. He shot up, lunged at her, and slapped her across the face. Maya fell onto the rug, sobbing in a small, desperate voice. "I'm sorry, please." I felt my heart stop. I just sat there paralyzed in front of the screen, with tears streaming down my face without realizing it. My daughter's sobs were like knife stabs to my soul. Richard put on his coat, left angrily, and slammed the door with a dry thud that pierced my chest. I couldn't think anymore. I put on a light coat and ran straight to Maya's house. The streets of Chicago were getting dark. The streetlights barely dispelled the fear that was choking me. All I knew was that I had to get to my daughter immediately. When I arrived, Richard was gone. The house was silent except for the dry ticking of the clock on the wall. Maya was huddled in a corner of the sofa with swollen eyes and messy hair. When she saw me, she flinched and quickly wiped her tears. "Mom, what are you doing here at this hour?" she asked with a trembling voice, as if she feared I would discover something. I ran to hug her, and my voice trembled just as much. "My sweet girl, what has he done to you?" I felt her body tremble in my arms like a wounded bird. Maya panicked and waved her hands, trying to deny it. "It's nothing, Mom. I just made him angry by accident." But her voice was breaking, as if she didn't believe what she was saying herself. I gripped her shoulders, looking her straight in the eyes, emphasizing every word. "I saw everything, Maya. I know what you've had to endure." It was then that she burst into tears with a heartbreaking sob, each gasp cutting through the silent room. "It's just couples problems, Mom. He doesn't do it on purpose," she managed to say between tears. But I knew she was trying to protect him, or maybe protect herself from a truth too painful to accept. I swallowed my tears, not revealing anything about the hidden camera. I just squeezed her hand tightly and comforted her. "It's okay, sweetie. I'm going to be with you. You're not alone anymore." Maya collapsed on my shoulder, crying like a child. I stayed there, holding her, my heart in pieces. I thought about when she was little, when she would run through the house, laughing out loud, telling me her dreams of opening a bakery. Now that radiant daughter had been replaced by a fearful, shrunken young woman, always trying to hide the wounds on her body and in her soul. That night, Richard called, his voice slurring from alcohol. "I'm sleeping over at a friend's tonight. I'm not coming back." I saw Maya sigh with relief, but her eyes were still empty, lost beyond the window, as if she lived in another world. I thought about going home, letting her rest. But seeing her sitting there motionless in front of the window, with her arms wrapped tightly around herself, I didn't have the heart. "I'm staying with you tonight," I told her firmly, though a storm of fear and anguish was raging inside me. Outside, the rain began to fall hard, the drops hitting the roof and thunder tearing through the night. That cold air perfectly reflected my mood, an unspeakable unease. I asked Maya to go to bed early, hoping she could get some rest. "Go to sleep. I'm here," I said, forcing a smile to reassure her. She nodded silently, entering the room with heavy steps, as if carrying an invisible weight. I went to the bathroom to wash my face and shake off the exhaustion, planning to spread a blanket and stay in the living room. But as soon as I touched the water faucet, a loud crash echoed from the living room. The sound of a chair falling made me jump. Immediately, a heart-wrenching scream from Maya cut through my chest like a knife. "Mom, help me." I ran out of the bathroom, my heart racing. The scene paralyzed me. Richard was back, his face red from alcohol, his clothes disheveled, and his body reeking of liquor. He had Maya by the hair, insulting her nonstop. Useless. "I lost all my money because of your damn bad luck." Maya was crying desperately, struggling in vain, her voice barely a whisper between sobs. "I'm sorry. Please stop." Her broken voice, full of terror, was like that of a cornered animal. I screamed with a raw throat. "Let her go now!" I threw myself at him, pushing him with all my strength, shielding my daughter with my body. He stumbled, but his bloodshot eyes looked at me with fury. "She's my wife!" he roared, blocking the door with his arms spread as if he could stop the whole world. "You have no right to take her anywhere." I couldn't hold back anymore. All the pain, the fear, and the rage ignited inside me like a wildfire. "You have no right to hurt her," I shouted, my voice trembling but full of determination. I squeezed Maya's hand, pulling her behind me, even though my legs were shaking too. "Mom, I'm so scared," she cried, her body racked with panic in my arms, her tears mixing with the rain that beat against our faces. I rushed Maya out onto the porch. The rain lashed our faces and soaked us from head to toe. The icy wind blew hard, but I felt nothing but the fear of losing my daughter. I looked out at the dark street, praying for a glimmer of hope. Luckily, a taxi was passing by, its yellow lights as faint as a beacon in the storm. I waved my hand desperately, like someone clinging to a life raft in the middle of a shipwreck. "Please take us to the hospital," I shouted, my voice almost lost in the rain. The driver stopped the car, opened the door, and I practically pushed Maya inside before getting in after her. My little girl curled up in my arms, rain and tears mixing, soaking my clothes. Inside the taxi, I held her tight, trying to calm her, though I was shaking myself. "Please go as fast as you can. My daughter needs to be saved," I whispered to the driver with a broken voice. He nodded, stepped on the gas, and the car sped off through the curtain of water. Maya said nothing, just rested her head on my shoulder, her breathing weak, as if she had no strength left. I stroked her hair and murmured, "It's okay, sweetie. Mom is here. I won't let anyone hurt you again." The taxi screeched to a halt in front of the hospital entrance, the tires squealing on the wet asphalt. I helped Maya get out, our clothes clinging to our bodies, dripping water. The rain continued to fall mercilessly, as if it wanted to drown my last hopes. "Help my daughter," I cried with a broken voice, almost pleading as I saw the blurry lights of the hospital entrance. Maya leaned on me, weak, her eyes closed, her body trembling like a leaf in a storm. I squeezed her hand tightly to keep her standing, though I could barely support myself, my heart tight as if it were being crushed. A nurse ran out, pushing a gurney, her face serious but professional. "Get her to the ER!" she shouted to her colleagues, and they quickly laid Maya down and pushed her down the hallway, illuminated by fluorescent lights. I ran after them, my sandals slipping on the wet floor, each step feeling like a ton. The image of Richard, pulling my daughter's hair, dragging her across the floor, kept drilling into my mind like a stab wound that never stops. I wanted to scream to break everything to get the pain out, but I knew I had to be strong. In the emergency room, the nurses began to remove her soaked clothes. When they took off her long-sleeved blouse, I froze. Maya's body was covered in bruises, some old, some recent, staining her skin like a horror painting. In some places, she was still bleeding, as if her body had been relentlessly punished. I covered my mouth with my hand. The tears flowed uncontrollably. "My God, my daughter," I whispered, my voice breaking. The nurses looked at each other. One let out a sigh, but none dared to say a word. I saw in their eyes compassion mixed with helplessness, as if they knew something they couldn't say. The head of the ER, a middle-aged man with the name Miller on his badge, walked in. He gave Maya a quick glance with a cold, disinterested look, as if he just wanted to get the paperwork over with. After a few minutes of examining her, he said dismissively, "She fell down the stairs. It's nothing serious." I stood there paralyzed, unable to believe what I was hearing. "She fell down the stairs?" I shouted, my voice trembling with rage. "Look at her. These bruises, these wounds, how can they be from a fall? This is clearly abuse." I pointed to my daughter's body, the wounds that screamed the truth he was determined to ignore. Miller raised his eyebrows, his voice arrogant. "You're not a doctor. The medical record will state it as such." His words were like a punch to my face. I felt the blood rush to my head, helplessness welling up as if it wanted to drown me. "Don't hide the truth," I cried, tears streaming down my cheeks. "This is my daughter's life. Don't you see? She was beaten." But Miller just shook his head, turned around, and told the nurses to continue their work. Two nurses nearby lowered their gazes, riding silently, not daring to look up at me. I stood there, my hands clutching the back of the chair, feeling like the whole world was turning its back on my daughter and me. Just when I was on the verge of despair, a young, small-framed nurse approached me. She looked around, as if afraid someone would see her, and whispered in my ear, "Ma'am, there's pressure from above. They're forcing us to alter the report." I turned and met her firm eyes. On her uniform, the name tag clearly read Sarah Hernandez. Her voice trembled slightly, but it was full of determination. Before I could say anything, she discreetly placed a small folded paper in my hand. "This is a scan of the original report," she said in a low but firm voice. "Keep it. Don't let anyone know I gave it to you." I clutched the paper in my hand, feeling like I had found a ray of hope in the middle of the storm. "Thank you, sweetie," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. "You've saved us both." Afterward, the nurses bandaged Maya superficially, as if they just wanted to get the case over with quickly. One of them reported in a monotonous tone, "She's stable. She just needs to rest at home." I looked at them, then at my daughter, still lying there weak and insecure. I knew I couldn't let her go back to that house where Richard was waiting to continue abusing her. "I'm taking you to my house," I said in a firm voice. Although inside, rage and fear were still roaring, I supported Maya as we left the hospital. It was still raining, but I no longer felt cold. There was only a fire burning inside me, the fire of a mother determined to protect her daughter. The next morning, when the first rays of sun came through the window, I woke up with a heavy heart. After that stormy night, the image of Maya huddled in the hospital, her body covered in bruises, wouldn't leave me in peace. I knew I couldn't stay still. I had to go back to that house where my daughter had suffered so much to get more clothes and things for her. I took an old cloth bag and walked down the familiar street, but each step felt heavier, as if I were heading to a place full of danger. My heart was torn between worry and determination, because I knew that if I didn't act, I would regret it forever, for not having done enough to protect my daughter. When I arrived, I pushed the gate open and went inside. Richard wasn't home. The house was eerily silent. Only the smell of cigarettes lingered on the sofa, a reminder of his presence. I stood in the living room, took a deep breath, trying to shake off the chill running down my spine. I entered Maya and Richard's room, which had once been my daughter's home, but was now just a dark place. A drawer was half open, papers scattered on the desk, as if someone had hastily gone through them. I approached with trembling hands, going through them page by page, not knowing what I would find. Among the messy pile of papers, a thick stack of documents caught my eye. The words "life insurance contract" printed on the cover sent a chill down my spine. I picked it up with a hand that trembled so much I almost dropped it. When I opened it, the name of the insured person appeared clearly: Maya Salgado, and the sole beneficiary, Richard Salgado. I felt my heart stop. The space for Maya's signature on the contract was still blank, as if waiting for a fateful moment. I stood there paralyzed. A sense of horror washed over me, as if I had touched a dark secret. It turned out that Richard not only beat my daughter, he was also planning to take her life for money. I rummaged through the surrounding papers, trying to stay calm even though my mind was spinning. Among them, I found some handwritten notes in Richard's sloppy handwriting. Must sign before the end of the month to activate. In case of injury, collect advance. Next to them was a business card with the words Julian Ortega Insurance Advisor. I looked at it, feeling like I was holding a piece of a macabre plan. Everything started to fall into place. The bruises on Maya's body, her clumsy lies, and even the way Dr. Miller at the hospital ignored the truth. Everything was connected like a pre-laid net. I took out my phone and took pictures of every page of the contract, every note, and the business card too. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to be careful not to miss any detail. Then I put everything back in its place, making sure to leave no trace. As I was packing Maya's clothes, putting some shirts and belongings into a bag, I jumped when I heard the screech of the metal gate. My heart was racing. I immediately turned off the bedroom light and held my breath behind the door. I thought of Richard, that he could come back at any moment and find me there. Luckily, it was just a friendly neighbor dropping off a letter that had been delivered by mistake. "Thank you," I said with a trembling voice, trying to hide my fear. I let out a sigh and quickly left the house with the bag as if fleeing a nightmare. When I got home, I dropped the bag on the floor and saw Maya sitting on the sofa, her eyes still swollen from the night before. She looked at me and asked in a low voice, "Did you go get my things?" "Mom, did you see him?" She sounded nervous, as if she feared that just mentioning Richard's name was enough to make him appear. I sat down next to her, took her hand, and felt how cold her fingers were. "No, he wasn't there," I answered firmly, although inside the truth of the insurance policy weighed on me like a rock. "But you have to believe me, Maya. We are facing a plan much more terrible than you can imagine." Maya's eyes widened in fear. "What plan, Mom?" I saw the fear in her gaze and knew I couldn't tell her everything yet. If I told her the truth that Richard not only beat her, but also wanted to kill her for money, I feared she would completely break down. I squeezed her shoulder to reassure her. "I'll tell you one day, but for now, your job is to rest. Let me take care of everything." Maya nodded, but I noticed her eyes were still full of doubt and fear. She leaned against me, and I held her tight, trying to hide the pain that was tearing me apart inside. After discovering the insurance contract, I could barely sleep. That night, I lay in bed, my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, listening only to the ticking of the clock in a suffocating silence. The image of the document with the words "life insurance contract" appeared again and again in my mind, along with the name Richard Salgado clearly written as the beneficiary. I thought about the bruises on Maya's body, his icy gaze, and that scribbled note about the plan to activate it before the end of the month. It was all like a nightmare, and I knew I had to act. I couldn't let my daughter continue to live in that fear. The next morning, as the first rays of sun pierced through the curtains, I saw Maya asleep in bed, her face pale but peaceful in her sleep. I went out to the balcony in silence, phone in hand. I took a deep breath to gather my courage. I decided to call Richard's mother, Stephanie, in whom I once hoped to find an ally, a mother who would understand a child's pain. I dialed the number, my hand trembling and my heart full of hope mixed with unease. As soon as the call connected, without giving me time to finish my sentence, she let out a cold voice that cut me off. "Why are you calling me at this hour?" Her tone was as sharp as a knife, without a hint of emotion, as if I were a stranger bothering her. I suppressed the anger rising in my chest and forced out each word. "Stephanie, do you know how your son has beaten my daughter? I have enough proof. The bruise is the time she ended up in the hospital. You can't not know." I hoped my voice sounded firm, that it would reach her, that she would understand this wasn't a game and that my daughter was suffering. But all I heard from the other side was a mocking laugh, cold and brazen. "Men with strong tempers are normal," she said in a flat tone, as if talking about the weather. "It's a couple's issue. Let them solve it. Don't exaggerate." I was frozen, as if I had been slapped. "Beating her until she has to go to the hospital seems normal to you?" I shouted, my voice trembling with rage. I couldn't believe that a mother, a woman, could say something like that. But Stephanie was unfazed. "One must know how to maintain the family's appearances," she replied with an air of superiority. "Otherwise, your daughter is the one who will be pointed at." That sentence was like a knife straight to the heart. I was trembling with fury, gripping the phone so tightly my fingers hurt. I couldn't stand another second and hung up, not wanting to hear another shameless justification. I stood on the balcony, looking at the bustling street of Chicago, but inside I only felt a cold emptiness. I thought of Maya, of the times she tried to hide the bruises and the terrified look every time Richard watched her. And now I understood that not only he but also his mother were complicit in this cruelty. I felt like the whole world was against us, but at the same time, a flame of determination began to burn in me. I was not going to let them win. I was not going to let them continue to hurt my daughter. When I re-entered the house, Maya was already awake. She was sitting on the sofa, her eyes red as if she had just been crying. "Mom," she called out, her voice small and trembling. I realized she had heard the end of the call with Stephanie. Tears began to run down her cheeks. "Mom, I'm sorry," she said, her voice choked. I stayed quiet all this time because his mom forced me to. They said if I dared to speak, they would make sure we both never had peace. Her words tore me apart inside. I ran to her, held her tight, feeling her body tremble in my arms. "You have nothing to be sorry for, Maya," I said, my own voice breaking. "I'm the one who should be sorry for not seeing it sooner." Maya sobbed, recounting the times Richard had abused her. Once he hit me because I spilled a glass of water. His mother was there. She saw everything, but she just scolded me, saying I was inconsiderate, that I didn't know how to take care of my husband. "I'm so scared, Mom. I'm afraid that if I tell, they'll do something to you." Hearing her, I felt my heart break. I thought about the days my daughter had to live in fear, forced to remain silent, abandoned by her husband's entire family. I held her tighter, my own tears falling, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "You don't have to be afraid anymore. I am here, and I will not let anyone hurt you ever again." That night, when Maya was sound asleep, I sat silently in my small room. The dim light from the lamp illuminated my face, but couldn't dispel the cold that squeezed my heart. After the call with Stephanie, Richard's mother, I couldn't stop thinking about her words. How she downplayed my daughter's pain as if it were nothing. But even more, the life insurance contract and Richard's scribbled notes obsessed me. I knew I needed more proof to clearly see the dark picture surrounding Maya. I reached for the laptop connected again to the secret camera, my heart beating so fast it felt like it would burst from my chest. The screen lit up, showing Maya's living room. Richard was sitting on the old sofa, across from a middle-aged man in a plaid shirt with an unsettling air of confidence. On the table between them was a half-finished bottle of liquor and several scattered glasses. I zoomed in, trying to catch every detail. They spoke in low voices, but the camera's microphone picked it up so clearly it made me shudder. The man with a wicked smile said, "Richard, you have to convince your wife to sign quickly. If she doesn't sign, the contract is invalid. I've already set everything up." His voice was smooth, as if he were talking about any other business deal. But every word was a knife. Richard replied in a harsh tone filled with cruelty, "Don't worry, Julian. I'll make her sign, and if she doesn't want to, I have plenty of other ways." I strained to see the table where I saw a business card lying there. The words Julian Ortega insurance agent jumped out at me. It was him, the name from the notes I found days before. My heart pounded harder, as if I had stumbled upon a monstrous secret. Julian lowered his voice and continued. The last injury was already covered by an advance, but the report needs to be valid. Dr. Miller certified it again as a fall down the stairs. Everything went perfectly. I clenched my fists tightly, my nails dug into my palm. Dr. Miller, that name again fitting like a perfect piece in this criminal web. Richard let out a sarcastic laugh, his voice overflowing with greed. Later on, I don't just want a few advances. I want to collect the whole thing. Julian twisted his mouth into a cold, sinister smile. Then later we'll stage a car accident. That way we take the whole jackpot. I'll take care of everything. I froze. My hands trembled so much I almost dropped the phone I was holding. They were talking about killing my daughter as if it were a business plan. In the video, Richard raised his glass with a triumphant tone. Let's toast to my future. Julian raised his glass and laughed out loud. And to the early death of your wife. The sound of their glasses clinking echoed cold and sharp like a hammer blow straight to my heart. I immediately saved the entire recording, my hands shaking as I copied it to a spare USB drive. I reviewed every second, every minute, making sure not to miss any detail. As I closed the laptop, my heart was still racing, as if I had just gone through a storm. Now I understood this wasn't just domestic violence. It was an organized criminal network with Richard as the one doing the direct hitting, Julian pulling the strings, and Dr. Miller covering up the truth. I thought of Maya, of the bruises on her body, and the look of fear every time she mentioned Richard. I felt my heart tear apart, but at the same time, a flame of determination ignited within me. They think they're clever, but they don't know a mother is willing to do anything to protect her daughter. After witnessing the horrifying conversation between Richard and Julian through the hidden camera, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The evidence in my hands, the video, the scanned copy of the original report from Nurse Sarah, and the photos of the insurance contracts were powerful weapons. But I needed someone to help me turn them into justice. I immediately thought of Rick Rivers, an old friend of my late husband, a renowned human rights lawyer in Chicago. I picked up the phone, my hands still trembling, and called him. Rick, I need your help, I said, my voice choked. My daughter's life is in danger. I have evidence, but I don't know what to do next. Rick didn't ask many questions. Just replied, Linda, I'm on my way right now. When Rick arrived, I told him the whole story, from the bruises on Maya's body to the insurance contract and the terrifying video. I showed him every piece of evidence, every photo, every second of the recording. Rick stood there thoughtful, his sharp eyes reviewing every detail. After a long moment, he looked at me and said in a grave but firm voice, Linda, this isn't just a case of domestic violence. This is an organized criminal network. Richard, Julian, and even Dr. Miller, they are all involved. His words were like a ray of light in the darkness, but they also chilled my blood. I knew I was facing something bigger than I could imagine, but for Maya, I was ready to fight. Rick got to work immediately, drafting the complaint, sending it to the district attorney's office, and discreetly contacting potential witnesses. I stayed at home taking care of Maya, trying to keep her calm, although I was terrified myself. A few weeks later, Rick called me again, his voice full of determination. Linda, I found 3 more women who were also victims of Richard and Julian. They were deceived, beaten, and forced to sign similar insurance contracts. They have agreed to testify at the trial. Hearing that, I felt a ray of hope, but at the same time, my heart was heavy. How many women had suffered the same as my daughter? How many were still living in the shadows? On the day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, onlookers, and even neighbors from the block had come. I walked in with Maya, holding her hand tightly. I felt her tremble, but in her eyes, there was a determination I hadn't seen in a long time. Mom, I want to do this, she whispered, her voice low but firm. I squeezed her hand, holding back my tears. I'm here with you, Maya. We will get through this. On the other side, Richard, impeccably dressed in his suit, sat with a calm expression, as if he had nothing to fear. Beside him, Julian smiled maliciously, and Dr. Miller maintained a cold gaze. In the back row, Stephanie, Richard's mother, sat with a defiant expression, as if daring anyone to touch her son. The trial began, and the defense attorney stood up brazenly, showing a fake medical certificate. "Maya Salgado suffers from mental disorders," he declared in a smooth voice. "She often self-harms and has delusions about her husband." I was so outraged I jumped up from my seat. My blood was boiling. "Lies!" I shouted, but Rick gently placed his hand on my shoulder, asking me to be calm. I sat back down, my hands gripping the edge of the seat, trying to contain the rage consuming me. It was Maya's turn. The trembling girl took the stand, her hands clasped tightly. Slowly, she rolled up her sleeves, revealing the scars and bruises still marked on her skin. The room fell silent. Maya took a deep breath, her voice choked but firm. "I did not give myself these wounds. This is the result of my husband's hands. Richard Salgado." A murmur went through the room. The reporters turned their cameras, capturing every moment. I looked at her, my heart in pieces, but at the same time I felt proud. My Maya, though scared and hurt, was still standing, facing the truth. Rick stood up. His voice resonated with strength. "We have irrefutable evidence." He asked to project the video from the hidden camera. The large screen in the courtroom lit up clearly, showing Richard slapping Maya until she fell to the ground, and the chilling conversation between him and Julian about the insurance fraud scheme. Maya's sobs from the video filled the room, leaving everyone holding their breath. I saw the look in Richard's eyes change from confidence to panic. Julian lowered his head, his hands clenched. Dr. Miller remained motionless, but the beads of sweat on his forehead betrayed him. Rick then called Nurse Sarah Hernandez as a witness. The young woman came forward, her voice trembling but resolute. Dr. Miller ordered me to alter the medical report to say, "Fall down the stairs." But here is the original, where it is clear that the injuries were the result of violence. Sarah placed the scan on the table, her gaze firm. Then 3 other women stood up, one after another, telling their stories. An elderly woman with a broken voice recounted how Richard forced her to sign an insurance policy and beat her when she refused. Another younger woman described the days she lived in fear, under constant threats if she dared to speak. Their stories were like knife stabs, shaking the entire room. Richard was already pale, muttering curses, his hands clenched as if he wanted to destroy something. Suddenly, Stephanie jumped up, shouting, "Don't believe her! That girl is crazy. It's all a lie." But the judge banged the gavel, his voice stern. "Order in the court." All eyes were on Richard and his accomplices. The atmosphere was as tense as a rope about to snap, as if the whole world was waiting to see justice served. Rick Rivers, the lawyer who had become a pillar for my daughter and me, stood up. His voice boomed like thunder. "This is the final proof," he declared, showing an incomplete copy of the insurance contract with Maya's signature still blank. "This document proves that the plan of Richard Salgado and his accomplices was not completed, but the intent to take Mrs. Maya Salgado's life is undeniable." The entire courtroom fell into absolute silence, as if everyone was holding their breath before that terrifying truth. The judge, an older man with a stern look, reviewed each of the documents and videos Rick presented. After a long while, he banged his gavel, and his voice boomed with firmness. "Richard Salgado is being prosecuted for domestic violence and attempted murder. Julian Ortega and Dr. Miller will be investigated for complicity. Mrs. Stephanie Salgado is sanctioned for perjury and defamation." The sound of the gavel echoed sharp, as if tearing away all the fear inside me. I squeezed Maya's hand tightly, feeling it tremble. But this time it wasn't from fear, but from release. As Richard was escorted out of the courtroom, he turned to me, his eyes red with fury, and shouted, "If it weren't for you, I would have had everything." His voice was loaded with rage, but I just looked at him coldly as they led him away in handcuffs. I didn't answer. There was no need. He had lost and justice had won. Stephanie, his mother, sitting in the back row, had a pale face without her previous defiance. I saw her lower her head and silently leave the courtroom, as if wanting to escape everyone's gaze. I later found out that the entire neighborhood shunned her, and she eventually had to move far away. No one even wanted to mention her name. The press covered the case everywhere, sparking a wave of outrage in the community. Headlines like "Insurance Fraud Plot Uncovered" or "Brave Mother Protects Daughter" appeared in all the newspapers. I read them, but I didn't feel pride. I only felt relief because finally the truth had come to light. Weeks later, Maya received the divorce decree from the court. That day, my daughter came to my house with a small suitcase in her hand. She hugged me tightly and burst into tears. "Mom, I'm finally free." I hugged her back, also with tears in my eyes, but this time they were tears of happiness. "You are so strong, Maya," I whispered, stroking her hair. "I am so proud of you." Time passed and the bruises on Maya's body healed. More importantly, her old smile returned to light up her face. One morning, while we were having breakfast together, Maya suddenly said, "Mom, I want to go back to my old dream. I want to open a small bakery just like I dreamed of as a child." Hearing her, my heart filled with joy. I took her hand and smiled. "Then we'll do it together. We're going to start over, Maya." We decided to name the bakery Sunrise as a promise of a new beginning after the dark days. On opening day, the whole neighborhood shone under the morning sun. People came in droves, bringing flowers and congratulations. Rick Rivers showed up with a warm smile. "Linda, you and Maya achieved the impossible." Nurse Sarah Hernandez also came, her eyes bright. "I knew you would do it, Mrs. Linda." Maya was behind the counter, her hands a little shaky but full of happiness as she cut the first slice of cake. She wore a white apron, her hair tied back, and a smile as radiant as the sun. Looking at her, it was like seeing the old Maya again, the little girl who ran through the kitchen covered in flour, laughing out loud while baking her first bread. I stood in the middle of the bakery watching people chat lively. Laughter echoed everywhere. I stepped forward, my voice choked but full of pride. Justice doesn't just arrive by magic. It comes thanks to Maya's courage, to the undeniable evidence, and to allies like Rick, like Sarah, who dared to stand on the side of truth. The whole bakery fell silent for a moment, and then erupted in deafening applause. I saw Maya's eyes shine, no longer with the fear I once saw, but with freedom and joy. Outside, the soft light of dawn streamed through the door, illuminating my daughter's radiant face. For the first time in so many years, I felt I could take a deep, relieved breath. I stood there watching Maya talk to customers, her hands quickly wrapping bread, and I knew we had left the darkness behind. This journey was not easy, but it was worth it for Maya, for a mother's love, and for the faith that justice, however difficult, will always find its way. And now, looking back on everything we've been through, I just want to leave you with a message. Never stay silent in the face of evil. Never underestimate the bruises or the choked sobs in the darkness. Violence is not a normal part of a marriage, nor is it ever the victim's fault. If you see strange signs in your children, grandchildren, friends, or neighbors, please listen to them, believe them, and act. Because when we are silent, evil grows stronger. But when we raise our voices, when we hold hands and stand on the side of truth, even in the darkest night, the light of justice will always find a way to shine. The story you have just heard has been modified in names and places to protect the identity of the people involved. We don't tell this to judge, but with the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own homes? I truly wonder if you were in my shoes. What would you do? Would you choose to stay silent to keep the peace, or would you dare to face it all to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story is like a candle that can light someone else's path. God always blesses, and I am convinced that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the end screen, I'm leaving you two of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.